I don't know how long the lantern will last. The shadows here don't behave like normal darkness. They lean in when the light flickers, pulsing with whispers that slip into my ears like cold fingers. I keep telling myself the stories about the House of Endless Night were superstition, but as I sit here scribbling these words with bleeding knuckles, I know I have led us into the heart of something meant to stay buried. I was the one who pushed for this. Dr. Marcus Adler, once considered promising, now disgraced after a disastrous dig in Luxor cost 2 men their lives. My obsession with the pyramids seen in old satellite photos was the last thread holding my career together. I sold everything to fund this expedition, betting everything on finding something that would redeem my name. Dina never judged me for my past. She grew up in Giza, raised by a father who spent nights reading her ancient Egyptian myths. She could read Middle Egyptian better than anyone I knew, and she was fearless, maybe too fearless. Andre was born with a camera in his hands. He once told me he'd sell his soul if it meant capturing proof of the supernatural. When I called him about a pyramid unseen by historians, he boarded the next plane. Sophie, our medic, had a past she never spoke about. She woke up screaming some nights in the camp. Ravi was our engineer, an expert in excavation gear, who took this job to pay for a black market transplant to save his father. Lucas, our logistics man, had served in 3 wars and scanned the dunes every night, convinced something watched us. He was right. The 3rd night in the camp was when it all began. The ground pulsed like a heartbeat, sending ripples through our tents. Watches stopped at 2:47 a.m. A low hum vibrated in our teeth, and the dunes shifted, slumping to reveal something unnatural, the tip of a capstone glinting in the moonlight. At dawn, we stood before the pyramid's entrance, a slit of darkness between 2 basalt columns half buried in sand. My hands trembled as I reached for the amulet around my neck, a tarnished silver eye entwined with a serpent, given to me by the veiled old woman in Cairo. She had said, "It protects you, but it also marks you." I hadn't understood. Dina slipped through the entrance first. The corridor beyond was impossibly narrow, stone walls pressing in from every side. My headlamp cast a weak cone of light over hieroglyphs spiraling along the walls in nonsensical patterns, glyphs twisted into grotesque versions of familiar symbols. The first chamber swallowed us whole, its arched ceiling vanishing beyond the beams of our headlamps. The air felt wrong, thick, cold, and damp as a crypt. Our steps echoed like we walked inside a giant's ribcage. The floor was slick with something black and viscous, staining our boots. Dina's eyes flicked across the walls. These hieroglyphs, they're wrong. She traced one spiral with her gloved hand. The symbols depicted a procession of priests flaying themselves alive before a towering figure, a pharaoh with 6 arms and a crown of writhing serpents. The glyphs ended at the same repeating inscription, "The devourer who waits." Andre kept his camera trained on the murals, his breathing ragged. "Look at this footage," he whispered. On the tiny screen, the hieroglyphs shifted and pulsed as if alive, symbols reshaping themselves into new patterns every second. But when we looked back at the wall itself, it was static stone. "Marcus," Dina said, voice taut, "I think this place is aware." We pressed on through a narrow hall lined with statues, each the height of a man, each face shattered beyond recognition. As we passed, the temperature dropped further. Our breath billowed in pale plumes. Ravi's flashlight flickered. In those stuttering flashes of light, the statue's arms moved subtly, pointing deeper into the darkness. A gust of freezing wind roared from the depths. Somewhere ahead, a voice echoed, a child's voice, crying softly. We froze. Sophie shone her light into a side corridor. "It's a trick," she said. Yet she stepped toward the sound, drawn by it. I grabbed her shoulder. "No one wanders off alone." Lucas began muttering as we walked. "They're behind us," he kept saying. "I see them. I hear them." His words grew more frantic. He clawed at his headset until it snapped. "We were warned," he hissed, backing away. Andre tried to calm him, but Lucas pulled a knife. They wrestled, the scuffle echoing like gunshots. Lucas's knife clattered to the stone. his eyes rolling back as he collapsed. We dragged him along, every one of us breathing faster. We turned a corner, and the corridor widened into a vault, where massive stone tablets leaned against the walls. Each tablet bore inscriptions of sacrifices. Hundreds of prisoners knelt in rows, throats cut, their blood flowing in black rivers into a pit at the center of the chamber. Dina read a section aloud, voice trembling. "Those who feed the devourer are freed from the endless night. Those who refuse remain forever." A rumbling vibrated through the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. We followed the only path forward into a labyrinth of corridors that changed as we stepped. Hallways folded in on themselves, walls shifted sideways like sliding stone doors, and tunnels behind us closed without a sound. Andre mapped our route on a digital tablet, but every time he glanced down, the lines twisted into spirals. "We're walking in circles," he stammered, showing me the screen, but instead of our path, it displayed an endlessly looping pattern of the same hieroglyph, the serpent-eyed amulet symbol. We stumbled into a narrow stairwell spiraling downward. The walls wept black fluid, dripping onto our faces and hands. The smell of rot thickened. Somewhere below we heard stone grinding, a sound like colossal gears turning. The staircase seemed to go on forever. Each step creaked beneath our boots, like ancient bones snapping. The deeper we went, the stronger the smell of stale blood became. Dina began reciting protective prayers in a language older than written history. Each word made the walls shudder, flakes of stone drifting down like black snow. Halfway down, the stairs ended abruptly at a circular room. The floor was carved with a massive eye surrounded by concentric rings of hieroglyphs. Around the edges, dozens of sealed canopic jars sat like silent sentinels. Each was stamped with the same serpent eye seal as my amulet. Sophie stepped forward, drawn by a faint, high-pitched hum. She lifted one jar. A child's wail shrieked through the chamber, freezing our blood. The jar trembled in her hands, the wax seal cracking. A black mist seeped out, snaking across the floor like living ink. In the mist, we saw faces, twisted, contorted, screaming in silent agony. They clawed at us, fading as the mist evaporated. The air grew colder still. I glanced at Sophie. Tears streamed down her face. "I saw my brother," she whispered. He was burning." Andre backed into a corner, camera raised, babbling. "They're here. I see them through the lens. They're coming." His camera screen flickered with images none of us could see. Shadows shifting, figures darting between pillars, a tall shape draped in rotting linen moving just outside the light. Lucas awoke with a gasp, eyes wide and unfocused. He began laughing, a hollow, cracked sound. "The darkness has teeth," he rasped, gripping his chest as if his heart were freezing. His laughter turned to choking sobs. I remembered the first time I saw death up close, a collapsed dig site near Luxor, 2 workers buried alive. I spent hours digging them out with my bare hands, but by the time I reached them, they were cold, faces frozen in terror. I never recovered. Every night since, I've dreamed of sand pouring into my lungs. This place feels like that nightmare made real. We staggered onward, and the corridor bent sharply, walls slick with black slime that reflected our lights in twisted, nauseating patterns. We emerged into a cavernous gallery lined with massive stone statues, kings I did not recognize, each wearing crowns unlike any pharaoh in recorded history. Dina swept her light across them, voice shaking. "These names, they're not in any list of pharaohs. It's like they were erased." Carvings on the pedestals depicted entire armies kneeling before the devourer, each king offering their own heart held in outstretched hands. Around the gallery's edges, hieroglyphs detailed histories of empires ruled by these forgotten kings, each reign ending in collapse, famine, and erasure from time. The statue's eyes were open, not carved, but glassy and almost organic, glistening faintly. As we passed, their eyes seemed to follow us, reflecting our every move with unnatural precision. A grinding noise rolled through the chamber. The statues shifted minutely, stone feet scraping against the floor. I raised my lantern. Every king now stared directly at me. I stepped back. their heads turned in unison with a groan of shifting stone. Lucas swore under his breath. Dina whimpered. A vibration pulsed through the floor, low and steady, matching my heartbeat. A voice, deeper than thunder, rumbled from the darkness. Their names are forgotten. Yours will be next. We fled the gallery into a narrow tunnel sloping downward until the air grew damp and heavy. The tunnel opened into a massive underground lake, its waters so black our lights disappeared into their surface like ink. Giant stone pillars jutted from the lake at odd angles. Many snapped in half as if crushed by some colossal force. A small wooden skiff rested at the water's edge, impossibly intact despite centuries of rot and darkness. On its hull were glyphs matching those on the amulet. Without a word, we climbed in, the boat rocking as we pushed off. The silence was absolute, broken only by the slow, rhythmic drip of water from the ceiling far above. Halfway across, pale shapes floated beneath the surface, mummified bodies drifting just below, eyes open, jaws unhinged in eternal screams. Some began to rise, bobbing in the water around our skiff. Their arms drifted up like seaweed, brushing the boat's underside. The soft tapping of fingers against the hull grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, skeletal hands clawed over the sides, pulling themselves aboard. Lucas and Ravi fought them off, hacking with survival knives. Water sloshed violently. A corpse grabbed my ankle, cold fingers squeezing. I kicked free, nearly toppling into the lake. Andre fired flares into the darkness, each burst of light revealing dozens more figures wading through the water, advancing with jerky, broken movements. By the time we reached the far shore, the boat was covered in tattered linen scraps, the smell of rot thick on the air. We stumbled from the shore into a corridor that twisted sharply, sloping deeper. The air shimmered, every breath tasting of copper and ash. It felt like stepping into another world. Shadows crawled across the walls with lives of their own, coiling and uncoiling like serpents in the corners of my eyes. Lucas fell to his knees, sobbing. "She's here. She's here." He clawed at his own face, blood running from under his fingernails as he tried to tear something invisible from his eyes. I grabbed him, but he shrieked as if burned. Dina's voice began to echo strangely. "Marcus, we're not supposed to be here," she said, but her voice was layered with other voices. Dozens of them, male and female, old and young, each overlapping like a chorus of the damned. She turned to me, eyes black from edge to edge. "It's time to feed." I blinked. She was back to normal, pupils dilated but eyes brown again. She didn't remember what she'd said. Sophie stood frozen, staring at the corridor ahead. "Do you see it?" she whispered. I followed her gaze. The tunnel stretched impossibly far, walls lined with mirrors reflecting endless copies of ourselves. In one reflection, I saw myself alone, covered in blood, holding Dina's severed head. In another, I stood beside the veiled woman, her hand resting proudly on my shoulder. The reflections shifted with each heartbeat. They showed us running in circles, dying again and again, living through our worst nightmares on an endless loop. As we moved forward, the mirrors began to crack, spiderwebs of fractures spreading with each step. Whispers grew louder, familiar voices. My mother, a dead colleague, my own voice calling out in panic. I covered my ears, but the whispers were inside my skull. The corridor ended at the heart of the pyramid. The chamber had changed, walls heaving as if alive, floors cracking to reveal glimpses of writhing black tendrils slithering below the stone. The obelisk pulsed with a heartbeat matching my own. Chains snapped one by one with thunderous cracks. The devourer rose higher, limbs unfolding like a spider emerging from its lair. Its veil fell away, revealing a face without features, a swirling void of darkness, ringed by thousands of tiny red eyes blinking in waves. Dina dropped to the floor, blood pouring from her ears, chanting words that made the air vibrate with a low, sickening hum. Ravi lunged at the entity, detonating a shaped charge against its base. The blast rocked the chamber, sending stone fragments whistling through the air. The devourer staggered but did not fall. Instead, it shrieked, a soundless wave of force that threw us all against the walls, bones snapping like twigs. A giant hand of shadow swept across the floor, snatching Ravi and crushing him to pulp before dragging him screaming into the pit. Blood rained down in thick sheets. The walls split open, revealing more mummies clawing their way from hidden crypts, hundreds of them advancing with jerky, unnatural speed. I pulled Dina, slamming her against the altar in the center of the room. "Fight it," I shouted. Her eyes flickered, returning to normal for a moment. She took the amulet from my neck and held it high. Light burst from it, green fire blasting outward in a pulse. The mummies recoiled, their linen writhing like burning snakes. The devourer howled, its body cracking apart, darkness leaking from its form like ink bleeding into water. Chains still anchored it to the chamber, but they strained to breaking. The entire pyramid groaned as if the earth itself screamed. I scooped Dina into my arms and ran as stones fell like meteors around us. The ceiling split, a beam of moonlight cutting the darkness. The ground shook with the force of 1,000 earthquakes. Behind us, the devourer's roars shook the air, each one weaker than the last. We burst into the desert night, the pyramid collapsing into itself with a roar that echoed for miles. Sand swallowed the stones, dunes shifting violently as though an ocean wave swept across them. In moments the entrance vanished, and the desert lay flat and silent, no trace of the ancient structure remaining. I crawled from the debris, holding Dina's limp body. Her eyes fluttered open once before glazing over, breath rattling from her chest. I screamed her name into the silent night until my voice was gone. The stars above felt colder than I had ever known. I wandered the dunes for hours before military vehicles found me. They dragged me to an outpost, stripped my gear, and locked me in a tent. My eyes burned from the sun, my mind raw from what I'd seen. The next day, officials arrived, men in dark suits who smelled of air-conditioned offices far from the desert. They took my notes, my camera, even the bloodied amulet. They told me I had heat stroke, hallucinations, a mind broken by the desert. They burned everything. They threatened me with prison if I spoke. But in the hospital nights that followed, I heard footsteps shuffling outside my room. I caught glimpses of veiled figures standing beyond the floodlights. Sometimes, I heard the low hum of a heartbeat rising from deep below the earth. One morning, I woke to find a package at the foot of my bed, wrapped in black linen. Inside was the amulet, its serpent eye glinting faintly, and a note in spidery script: "The sands will shift again."